One of the best things about YouTube is the analytics. I don't know that there's another platform out there that gives you nearly as much data about how your content is doing and whether or not it's resonating with your audience. On the other hand, one of the worst things about YouTube is the analytics. People end up giving up on videos or giving up on channels, or hell, some people give up on YouTube because their latest video was 9 out of 10 instead of 1 out of 10. So on today's episode, I decided to ask my friend Rich about how he looks at his analytics and how he uses them to make decisions about what changes need to be made based on what the data is telling him. We had an awesome conversation and we covered a lot of ground, including how soon you need to pay off your title and thumbnail when you're making your video. We talked about whether or not you can tell if you're nailing that intro or when you are not nailing it, as well as what stats to look at depending on what types of videos you're making, because it's not a one-size-fits-all comparison. We're also going to talk about how you can group some of your videos together that are similar and use YouTube analytics in order to look at just those instead of your entire channel. We talked about all that stuff and a whole lot more, so I've marked out chapters down below so that you can go to the parts that are most relevant to you, but I really think that you'll enjoy the whole video if you watch it all the way through. Rich runs the gaming channel Fan the Deck. He's brilliant at identifying good titles and thumbnails, as well as reading the signals in his analytics page and knowing when to react. And that's the reason he has almost 10 million views on YouTube after less than 200 videos at the time that I'm recording this. So without any further delay, let's jump into the conversation, and I hope to see you on the other side. Talking about analytics. So whenever I'm looking at one of my videos that comes out and I'm wondering, okay, do I want to change anything? I always send him a message on Discord to ask him, hey, what do you think about this? So he's got a lot of really good insight when it comes to analytics. So I figured we could start off, like you and I were talking yesterday, and you said, I think topic 1 should be you have more control than you think, because I had said something to you as we were talking, and you said that's our first topic that we got to talk about, the idea that you have more control than you think. And I absolutely agree with you, but I want you to frame it if you can. What did you mean when you said that?
Yeah. So I want to give a couple caveats or prefaces first, right? And so first of all, I think that reps are the most important thing, and I think that's important to point out before you really, really think about analytics. Like, you should be looking at analytics the whole time. But the most important thing you can do is to do the thing, partially because those reps, creating multiple videos and creating them on some sort of schedule, helps you build the data that you can later use to analyze. And as you're learning, you're building an audience, right? So you're first starting with a smaller audience, and as you gain a larger audience, you can learn more from that data. So even if that audience differs, so like if you have one video when you get from one video to 100 videos, right, like that data will look different regardless of the size of your audience.
Absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I also have a gaming channel, which is like my main channel, but like we do a podcast on that channel about video games, and then I made another channel that was like clips of that, and I was watching the analytics on that new channel that I hadn't told anybody about, and man, do they look different than the analytics that I see on my regular channel. It's like night and day. It's so weird.
Strange. It's strange.
What were you about to say?
Yeah, so do the thing and build a schedule, and think of when people feel like they have to make a video every week, they think of it as like a deadline, and they don't want to sacrifice the quality of their video to get it up at the deadline. And I would say, don't think of it as a deadline. Think of it as a schedule, because the idea is you will sacrifice quality. You're going to sacrifice quality regardless, but you don't learn unless you do those reps. And by having a schedule, that means that if I am late to deliver this video, I'm going to have less time for the next video. If I'm really going to try to make videos weekly, let's say, if I take 10 days to make a video, then that means I'm only going to have 4 days left for the next video.
That's a really good point. So when you're looking at that in the lens of you have more control than you think, what do you like when you're getting ready to do this and you're looking at the analytics of a previous video? What are you looking for as indicators for what you should change for your next video?
Yeah. So when I say you have more control than you think, I think what happens to all of us creators, it happens to me a lot. And when you were saying it, it just really accentuated that it happens to a lot of people. People give up. They give up on themselves when thinking about channel analytics and how their channel is performing. People give up on types of videos. Like we face this a lot where we are in a niche and we have to make Steam Deck videos or we have to make handheld videos, and we give up on making any other types of videos. And then we give up on single videos, right? If a video is not performing well, we kind of give up on it a lot of times and say, well, I guess that topic wasn't interesting to people, or I guess that, that thumbnail was never going to reach people. So when I say you have more control is sometimes 99% of the time, right? Like especially for a single video, how people receive it has a lot to do with just the thumbnail, the title, and those first 30 seconds.
Oh, absolutely. Like one of the things that I think a lot of people do wrong, I don't want to say wrong, but a lot of people do it this way. And I feel like you don't do it this way, or at least I don't think that you usually do, is a lot of people make the video and then they're like, okay, now it's time to come up with the title and the thumbnail. And the better way to do it is to figure out what your title and thumbnail is going to be. Even if you don't know the rest of the video, figure out the title and the thumbnail, and then figure out, I don't want to say your intro because you should not do an intro, but figure out the first few things that you're going to say, and then ask yourself, do they tie directly back to your thumbnail and your title? And if you're looking at your analytics, you're going to see absolutely 100%. You're going to see that sharp drop. And you'll always see this because not a lot. Like sometimes I click on videos by accident when I'm scrolling, but you're going to see a sharp drop in the beginning, and your goal is to have that first 30 seconds be a lot more level. And in order to do that, you have to give the audience that payoff instantaneously. And somebody might think, well, if I do that, then they're going to stop watching after they get that payoff. And that's something that you and I've talked about a lot. Where I'm like, do I say this thing up at the front of the video, or do I wait and say it more at the end and just tell them that I'm going to talk about it? And you said that I should front load it because we were looking at analytics and trying to decide which was the better move. Yeah. What makes you say to front load it?
Yeah, so I've done it every way. And I've done the thing where, like, in the past, right, where I didn't have the thumbnail ready. I just made the video, and then I was like, okay, what's the title and thumbnail going to be? Because I was never a sort of designer or anything like that. I just wanted to make videos, right? So I would write what I wanted to say, and then I would say what I wanted to say. But why I say to front load it is because average view duration is one of the more important stats that we would talk about, which is how long are people watching your video? And in order to maximize that, how long people are watching your video, is to keep in mind that every single moment is more important than the next one. So if you're going to if you have to spend less time like editing your video, spend less time on the second half, spend less time on the last few minutes. Do everything you can to keep the person's attention for the beginning, and scale down from there. Because what happens is, number one, people want to just watch something, right? I do this a lot. I notice myself when I'm on YouTube, I will scroll and scroll and scroll until I find something interesting. But what I want is something that I can just sit there and watch for 10 plus minutes. Like maybe I'm doing my dishes, right? And I just want something that I can find that I'm going to enjoy watching for the next 10 to 20 minutes. At least for us long form creators, that's what we want to target, something like that. So people want to watch for that time, but if you don't catch them in those first 30 seconds, they're going to jump to something else. So that's why I say you want to start with the most important. You want to front load that information, and you want to front load that editing, that production, I would say, and just scale down over time.
Yeah, one of the things that I think a lot of people like, I'm going to bring up analytics for my other channel real quick. This is a video that I made about a device that got announced, and this is a pretty decent graph right here. There's always going to be that sharp dip, but it says here that 73% of viewers were still watching around the 30-second mark, which is above typical. So that turns out to be a really good video for me. This one didn't actually perform super well because it was outside of like the normal thing that my audience talks about. But the people who did watch it, they watched it for a pretty long time. Now, I did end up with like 31% at the very end, and what this part tells me is, okay, I had an outro. And that's something that you should probably try and not do, where you're like, okay, so, and then start summing up everything that you just said. That's clearly something that I probably did during this video, because you can see that huge drop off. But for the most part, it's a fairly flat line. And I think that shows that it's pretty good. Do you have, I know I'm putting you on the spot. I don't know if you have one that you can show that you think is either good or a really bad example.
Ooh, in terms of retention?
Yeah, of like your average view duration, like that kind of thing.
All right, so here for my, we want to look at engagement, right? So this retention overall, even before we get to the intro, the entire retention is above what I normally do. But the intro is 77% of the viewers are still watching around the 30% mark. You mentioned channel analytics, right? So I'm going to show that real quick. You can see what your typical retention is like if you go into the analytics tab, and I don't remember where it is now. Oh, yeah. So under content, you can
I'm not
see,
seeing it. Did you open it in a new window or something?
Oh, it's a new tab. Darn.
Yeah, it's you share it by tab on the Riverside app, so you got to share a different tab now.
That's fine. I'll just go from here. Can you still see? Yep. So here, under content, under your general channel analytics, you can see the videos where you had above typical intros and below typical intros. So you can see that video is the highest in the last, 365 days. So that's the best performing intro I've had in the last year.
Wow. And that video did not actually perform super well for you, did it? It performed below what you normally would do because it was a little bit outside of your regular audience.
Yes, and to your point, it performed poorly for the time frame I was looking at it in, right? So I typically make news videos, and so I have like a 7-day window where the news video will be relevant, maybe at best. And so after that 7-day window, the views start to trail. This one is so far not having that problem because it's not a news video, it's an evergreen video. So if I look at the analytics and I look at the CTR, which is how many people are actually clicking this video, it was never great. So my CTR for my first day would normally be above 6.5%. So compared to my other videos, it's not great, but it's remained constant over time. So it's remained above 4% for the last week. And for today, for right now, it's over 5%. This will regress to the mean, so it'll probably hover around 4%. But it's nice that this has been consistent, and I expect it to stay consistent for the next few weeks.
Yeah. So when we look at, when we're looking at our analytics versus other types of channels, one thing that you got to keep in mind is the channels that we run, the gaming channels that we run, are very heavily news focused. And because they're so heavily news focused, and you can close that, by the way, unless you have something else to show.
Nope.
And because they're so heavily news focused, one of the things that we would see in a typical channel for, say, I'm going to bring up a video that I just put out yesterday and show what that's going to look like. You see really, really rapid growth at the very beginning, and then it flatlines. And if you look at all of my, like, this is my average over a long period of time, it continues. It always has that very rapid beginning, and then it tapers off and flatlines over a long time. And that's because people really only care about the news story that I'm posting in the moment. and then after that it's old news, so it's not super useful. Now the video that Rich was just showing is what people call evergreen content, where, you know, if somebody wants to watch that video about these two video game companies, you know, in a year, it's still going to be relevant. Some of the things about it might change, but it'll still be relevant and people will still be interested in it. So instead of having that really rapid growth at the beginning that then flattens out, it's going to have a more natural and slow trend upward, and that might end up being one of his best performing videos over a really long period of time, because it's evergreen content versus news content. Anything that you want to add to that, Rich?
No, I think you called it right. Like it's something that will appeal to a broader audience, but YouTube still has to find that audience. And when people talk about the algorithm, that's really what the algorithm is, right? Like there's, you can think of the algorithm as the audience, and that's a nice hack in terms of finding out like what you're trying to do. Like, I want to please the algorithm. Well, you want to please the audience, but really what the algorithm is doing is trying to find your audience. So that's whatever you can do to make the algorithm's job easier in that regard is going to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you, a lot of people like to blame the algorithm. They like to say, okay, well, the algorithm didn't like this video, but what they should really be thinking is, this video was not useful for the people who YouTube thinks are my audience. And maybe you and YouTube have a different idea about who your audience is. And that is sometimes, you know, you say you have more control than you think. What do you do to try and break out of that? In order, like, what do you look at on your analytics to help you try and push things in that direction when you and YouTube don't agree?
Yeah. So I would say analytics are not facts, right? They are facts in terms of the raw numbers that you get, but a lot of times you're going to jump from this video is not doing well to this video is not good, or YouTube's not going to find my audience for this video. And that's not a fact. You're taking these signals and you're interpreting them. And so there are different ways you can interpret them other than the way I just described. So one of those things is when you're breaking out into something new, if you're going to do it on the same channel, you should at least, for your own mental health, right, is break that out into a different category of analytics. One of the things that I hate about YouTube analytics is that your video gets a 1 out of 10, a 2 out of 10. It gets ranked based on the previous 10 videos. And that can be helpful, but it can also be harmful in terms of the mental health and things like that, of always looking for that 1 out of 10 or always looking for great performance. But more importantly, it lacks context, because the last 10 videos you made, some of them may have been experimental, some of them may have been your bread and butter. And so go for it, Bill.
Well, I was going to say, like, you said something about this yesterday, because I was looking, because I have two very different styles of videos that I post on my gaming channel. I have a podcast, which, you know, you're on, and then I have the episodes that are all by myself. It's just me talking about a thing. And you like, I was looking at that and I was like, man, this video is not performing very well. And you said, well, how's it performing, you know, podcast wise? When you look at it, because it's a different video. A lot of times I'm by myself and I'm talking for 15, 20 minutes or something, and I post that. Those videos tend to do well. The podcast videos tend to not do as well, because they're like over an hour sometimes. And they're not nearly as focused, because we talk about a lot of different things in that. And so one of the things that you were like, or one of the things that you had said is, look at that as just the podcast and only compare it to the other podcast videos. Yep. And that's something that I think is a really important thing to do. And you can group up your videos. It's not an easy thing to do, especially if you didn't start doing it like right away, but you can put your videos into groups so that you can compare them. Okay, I want to look at just the podcast. Oh, okay, I want to look at just the reviews, or I want to look at just this kind of thing. And that can help you, you know, figure out how your video is doing without making it look at your whole channel. Does anything to add there?
No, I think that's right. And I will add in terms of how to view some of that data. So I'll share my screen again. You can see these are my quote unquote gaming news videos, and this is in a playlist. So you can do it in groups, like you said, Bill, but you can also look at it as a playlist. I have older videos than this that are gaming news, meaning they're not Steam Deck news, they're just general gaming and technology news. So I could, if I added those older videos to this playlist, I can use that to compare. And that would show me really interesting things because those older videos had like 2,000 views. And this one has, under 10,000, so it's not doing as well. But these other ones have 20 to 50K views, 20 to 60K views. And that is phenomenal for me for a video that does not feature the Steam Deck whatsoever. So that's a way to look at it. And then you can just, control tab, control tab, control tab. So what I'm doing is I'm holding control and clicking the analytics, and that'll open this in a new tab. You can't see the other tabs, but I open it in new tabs, and I can sort of control tab from there and see what the analytics are for each video. So you can see sort of a trend. You can start to build a trend in your mind of how those videos have done over time.
Yeah, and another thing to think about is when you are looking at the analytics, they can be very disheartening because they tend to compare just the most recent stuff.
Yep.
But if you go back and think about a year ago, Rich, if you got that many views on a video and you thought like, yeah, you would have been like 10,000 views on a video and you would have been like, holy cow, that's amazing. And just now you were like 9,000 views on that video. It's not doing too well. And it's so fast how quick that can change.
Yep.
And that's an extremely unhealthy thing that the human mind is really bad at dealing with is you don't you never compare yourself to where was I a year ago. You always are looking at, well, my last video had 20,000 views, so I want this one to have more than 20,000 views. And of course you do want to have more than the last video, but just because it doesn't hit as well as you think it should doesn't mean that you should quote unquote give up on it. Now, I've been trying to scroll through, and because it's funny, sometimes your old videos get found. Videos that you had quote unquote given up on, right? And you were like, okay, well, I guess that video didn't do so well. Oh, I think I may have found it. I think that this video didn't do so well. I posted this video and it just didn't really do anything. And then you move on and you make the next video and you kind of forget about that video. And then somebody finds that video after the fact. And you're like, okay, so what happens? Well, they leave a comment, and I saw this video. Somebody had left a comment, and I was like, okay, I wonder how that video is doing today, because I haven't looked at it. Like, this video, I think, is 2 years old. I'm trying to share 588. Yeah, it's 588 days old, this video. And if you look, like, it is miles beyond where my usual typical stuff is, which is in this very little narrow gray bar down at the bottom. It is way beyond that. Like, this has 76,000 views. It's saying 62.9 thousand more than normal. And this is one of those videos that when I posted it, I was like, okay, I think that this is going to do really well. And then it didn't. And I was really disappointed at the time that it didn't take off and people didn't watch it or click on it. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I got to move on and make something else. But because this is one of those things where it was an evergreen video, eventually it caught on and it just keeps on building. And you have to think of when you're looking at your analytics, what type of video are you making? Are you making something that somebody's going to watch in a year and it'll be useful for them? Or are you making something that's not going to be useful in a year? And I'm not saying don't make those videos, but think about your analytics through that lens in order to avoid some frustrations.
Yep, agreed. I think what you said about through a lens in order to avoid frustration is really like one of the most important things to keep in mind with analytics is that some of them, like you said, are going to be very discouraging, but you're trying to again, look for the signals. So we talked about intro. That's going to be a good way to ensure that people are watching over a longer period of time, and also ensure audience happiness, right? Because what YouTube says is that they're gauging happiness. So they're not telling you, or they're not specifically looking at CTR and AVD. They think that those are signals for how happy an audience is. So they're mixing those signals up with other ones, like those surveys you see at the end where you say, I enjoyed watching this. Overall, they're just trying to see that the person viewing this enjoyed their time. And the intro is one way to do that. The CTR is what you want to look at for if your video is reaching people, because the better your CTR is, the better your impressions are going to be. Yeah. And then
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go for it.
All right. Well, something else to keep in mind is that over time, your CTR is going to go down. Like, it'll start out really good because, your main audience, Rich just posted a video. I love Rich's videos. I'm going to click on Rich's videos. So first, you get a very, very high CTR. Like yesterday, I posted a video. I had like a 29% CTR in the first hour, which is really, really high for me. Right now, that video is sitting at around 18%, which is also really high for the next day. Because what happens is as YouTube gets these signals of, user happiness, and they look at that, they're like, okay, people like this video, so let's show it to more people. And the more people that YouTube shows it to, the less likely it is that somebody's going to be interested in clicking on that, because YouTube is trying to show it to people who don't know who you are. And like sometimes you might see a thumbnail and a title 6 or 7 or 8 times before you finally click on it. I know that happens with me sometimes. And so when you are looking at that CTR and it's you have a video that's been out a long time, then that CTR absolutely starts to drop. So like that video that is doing really, really well for my channel, what do you think the CTR is on that right now, Rich? Put him on a quiz mode here.
Oh, I don't know. I would have guessed like 10 to 15%.
Okay.
Like overall CTR.
Yeah. 4.2% overall.
Oh, I'm sorry. The track got it. Okay. I was thinking of the more recent video, the breaking news video.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. No, That one, I don't remember what that one is, but this one that is doing very well for me as a channel has a click-through rate of 4.2%. But that's so low because it has 660,000 impressions so far, which is really good. Now, I don't know what the heck happened right here. That's really weird. That huge spike at around 220 days after I posted it. Apparently, YouTube found some people that would really, really like it and started showing it to them. But overall, you got to remember, keep in mind when you are looking at these click-through rates and stuff, the higher the number for impressions goes, the lower your click-through rate is probably going to get. So you shouldn't get frustrated by that.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. We've been talking about impressions and click-through rate real quick, and I want to talk really quickly about when you launch a video. Everybody says, don't look at anything for the first hour, and that's probably good advice. But if you're anything like Rich, and if you're anything like me, boy, oh boy, is it hard. I have, in the past, set like a timer on my phone or on my watch to say, I'm not allowed to look until this bell goes off. And why am I getting that sound? I'm not allowed to look until that bell goes off. But almost all the time, I'm looking and like, how is it doing? Is it doing okay? Do I need to change anything? So in the first hour after you post a video, what are the signals that you're looking at the most? Yeah,
I think I want to go back to saying I'm not an expert, right? So like one of the reasons I think that this works for me, this being looking at the metrics really early, is because I am a news-based channel, right? If I was focused on evergreen content, I might wait longer before I looked at it. But because I'm a news-based channel, I I know that people are going to be wanting to click sooner rather than later. And so based on that, when I'm looking at the data, what I'm looking for is really how is the view performance compared to other videos of a similar nature. And that view performance includes CTR performance specifically. It's way too early to really look at the average view duration, but it's not that early to look at CTR. So if this CTR does start off a little bit wonky, where like if you only have 1 to 10, even 100 impressions, it may still be a little weird, but it starts to give a good indication by the time you're between 10 and 100. And you can compare that CTR, if you're familiar with previous times you've looked at your videos, to what that CTR was for the first half hour of a video. And once you know that, you start to get an idea of, do I maybe need to change the thumbnail, change the title? And one thing we haven't discussed here is having like a backup plan, right? Like having a backup thumbnail, title, and you can't change the intro, so you have to have the intro hopefully incorporate that backup if you've thought of it ahead of time.
Yeah, that's something that I've been really trying to get better at, is making multiple thumbnails in order to give me a way to pivot if maybe the thumbnail that I chose at the beginning it's just not resonating with people. No matter how much I like it, sometimes people are just like, nah, I don't need to click on that. And so I need to be able to pivot to some other, I don't want to say, I want to be able to pivot to some other, not a different topic, but a different way of looking at the beginning of my video.
Yeah.
In order to get people, oh, okay, that's more interesting to me, I'm going to click on that. So a lot of times, you as a viewer might be on YouTube and you're like, I watched a video, and then another video from the same creator comes up and you click on it, and it's a video that you already watched, but you never saw that thumbnail and title before, and you're like, what the, are they trying to trick me? They're not trying to trick you. They are trying to figure out what is the most effective, and that's going to start happening sooner rather than later, because or more often, I mean, because YouTube is going to give all creators the ability to upload multiple thumbnails and titles to their video and see which ones perform better, which is going to be amazing. Which is
agreed.
So
I can't wait,
man. If I could go back in time to when I first started on YouTube, I would have learned how to make thumbnails way sooner, because I used to just make a video and then just post it and let YouTube pick a thumbnail, which was terrible idea.
But I feel like a lot of people did during that time, right?
Yeah, probably. Well, I haven't been on YouTube that long. So no, maybe I just, the people who didn't know what they were doing that. So, hour one, you're looking and you're trying to make a decision on whether or not you want to change the title or change the thumbnail in order to improve. What about after, your video's been out for a few hours or maybe a day? What are you going back and looking at that video, or have you moved on and are working on the next one?
I'm usually looking at the last weeks of videos pretty regularly. I'm probably at an unhealthy level, right, in terms of how often I look at stats. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. One thing I would say, though, is if you do have an evergreen video, that is something that, you may want to come back to. So, for example, if something in the zeitgeist makes your video relevant again, you may want to look at the packaging for that video. I'm going to give you a different example. So we would do these reviews of the Steam Deck, right? Like every 3 months. And over time, they became less popular because everybody was like, I know what the Steam Deck is. I don't need another review. So we stopped making them. But the last one I made was called Steam Deck Q3 Review or Q4 Review, or 6 months later or 1 year later, something like that. But because it was the last one I made, I just ended up renaming it in the following year to Steam Deck Ultimate Starter Guide, and that gave it a new life. So that is just another thing to look at, is if it is an evergreen video and you think it is still valuable to this day, then consider repackaging it. And that's the word, by the way, that I found when you were trying to think of how to phrase it. I think it's the packaging, right? Because it does sometimes change how people receive your video. So I had a title and a thumbnail for the video that I showed you that was more evergreen, that kind of gathered negative sentiment, and I changed it by removing the word monopoly. That was the main thing I did, right?
Right.
And that changed the reception entirely of that video. The like ratio went up and the negative comments were reduced. And so like just that thumbnail and title can go a long way to how people receive your video.
Yeah, and a lot of people, you know, you might look at your thumbs down ratio or whatever, or the amount of negative comments that are coming in, and then decide to make a change like Rich did. When you do that, what do you look at? Like, what signals do you look at in your analytics to see if that was a good move for an older video like that?
Oh, for a thumbnail and title?
Yeah.
Really CTR. So I'm looking to see if the CTR changes at all. And what you may see as a result is if the CTR is getting better, you may see an uptick in impressions. So at first your impressions may look like this, and then they may look like that. And it may not be that pronounced, but you kind of get a feel again for when there's a little bump in impressions. And you typically take that as a good sign that the new title and thumbnail is helping.
Awesome. Well, Rich, thanks so much for coming on the show and talking about, looking at analytics for YouTube. It's such an interesting topic that probably after we stop recording, Rich and I are probably going to talk about it some more because it's super interesting. So if you're watching this, leave a comment down below for like, what kind of questions do you have about analytics? And maybe I'll be able to talk Rich into coming on the show again in the future so that we can talk more about analytics. Tell everybody one more time what your channel is so they can go find it and subscribe and all that stuff.
Fan the Deck. So FANTHEDECK.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then you're probably going to enjoy this one right here. And if you found it helpful, make sure you click on that like button before you get out of here.